live pictures coming into us. We can see here rescue crews. They are working through the night. They're trying to find survivors after those two successive earthquakes devastated.
2 earthquakes, 40 seconds apart. Not hours, not minutes. 40 seconds. The first one hit at 6:04 p.m. on a Wednesday evening. Magnitude 7.2. Buildings in Caracas started swaying. People ran into the streets. And everyone assumed the worst was behind them. It wasn't, because 40 seconds later, the ground cracked open again. This time, a 7.5. And that second number matters more than people realize, because the Richter scale is not linear. Every full point represents roughly 31 times more energy. The gap between a 7.2 and a 7.5 is not a small step. It is the difference between a building that shakes and a building that falls. And across Caracas on Wednesday night, buildings fell. A 22-story high-rise in the Altamira neighborhood, gone. A large waterfront hotel in Macuto on the coast, rubble. A bank in central Caracas, collapsed. Entire blocks in the capital of Venezuela photographed from the street, looking like images from a war zone. And as of right now, rescue teams are still working through the night, pulling people from underneath all of it. At least 32 people are confirmed dead. Over 700 are injured. And the acting president of Venezuela said plainly in her national address that those numbers do not yet include casualties from the coastal state of La Guaira, which she declared a disaster zone and called a true tragedy. When those numbers come in, the total is expected to rise significantly. This is what happened, why it happened, and why scientists are paying very close attention to what comes next. To understand Wednesday night, you need to understand the ground underneath northern Venezuela. Most people think of earthquakes as random, as if the earth just occasionally decides to shake without reason. But there is a reason. There is always a reason. And in Venezuela's case, that reason has been building for over a century. Northern Venezuela sits at the meeting point of 2 massive tectonic plates. The Caribbean plate to the north and the South American plate to the south. These 2 plates do not simply slide past each other cleanly. They collide at an angle, grinding and pushing against each other in what geologists call an oblique collision zone. That interaction created one of the most complex and dangerous fault systems in the Western Hemisphere, a network of fractures called the Boconó-Morón-El Pilar fault system, running 1,300 kilometers along Venezuela's northern edge. That is over 800 miles of active geological tension sitting directly beneath some of the country's most populated cities. Wednesday's earthquakes occurred inside a triangle formed by 3 separate fault systems: the Boconó Fault to the south, the Oca Ancón Fault to the north, and the Bucaramanga-Santa Marta Fault to the west. These are strike-slip faults, meaning the ground on either side moves horizontally past itself, like 2 hands rubbing side by side. When that movement stops being gradual and becomes sudden, you get an earthquake. And when you have been accumulating stress along those faults for over 125 years without a major release, what you get is Wednesday. The last earthquake of comparable size to strike Venezuela was in 1900. That is 126 years of stored geological energy releasing in 2 bursts, 40 seconds apart. The USGS described it as a doublet event, a rare configuration where 2 major earthquakes of similar magnitude rupture in nearly the same location within seconds of each other. That matters, because a building hit by a 7.2 is already compromised. Its structure has shifted, its joints have cracked, its walls have separated, and then the 7.5 arrives before anyone can brace for it. Buildings that might have survived one earthquake alone did not survive both. By 6:04 p.m., the first earthquake had already sent people running from their homes and offices into the streets of Caracas. An 80-year-old woman who survived the city's last major earthquake in 1967, an event that killed over 200 people, said this one was worse. A resident named Roberto Damas said the building shook from side to side, that the force was incredibly strong, that it tossed people around while they walked. A woman who escaped a collapsing building in Altamira described climbing over rubble in a cloud of smoke so thick she could not see in front of her. She said the scene was like a horror movie. Those descriptions are not an exaggeration. They are what a 7.5 magnitude earthquake at a shallow depth of 8 miles directly beneath a densely populated city actually feels like from the inside. Simon Bolivar International Airport sustained damage and was shut down. Power went out across large portions of the city. Cell signal dropped. Internet connectivity collapsed across Venezuela almost immediately after the quakes, confirmed by the infrastructure watchdog NetBlocks. In a country where more than 7.7 million people have already fled abroad in recent years, leaving behind parents and children and siblings, the sudden loss of communication landed like a second disaster on top of the first. Families in the United States, Colombia, Spain, Chile, unable to reach anyone. No calls going through, no texts, nothing. The USGS issued 2 separate red alerts through their pager system, the highest classification they use for both earthquakes. That designation means one specific thing. High casualties and extensive damage are probable, and the disaster is likely widespread. Most people in the region live in structures vulnerable to the level of shaking produced by these events. The pager system then ran its probability models based on population density, building quality, earthquake depth, and magnitude. It estimated a 44% chance of deaths, falling between 10,000 and 100,000, a 30% chance of deaths exceeding 100,000. Economic losses projecting potentially as high as 20% of Venezuela's entire GDP. Those are not scare numbers. They are statistical outputs from the same modeling system the USGS uses for every major earthquake on Earth. And the reason they sit so high is not just the magnitude of the quakes. It is what was already underneath them. Venezuela was not in a position to absorb a disaster of this scale. Before Wednesday, the country sits on the world's largest oil reserves, larger than Saudi Arabia's, and yet its economy has contracted by roughly 80% since 2013. Years of hyperinflation, government mismanagement, corruption, and US-led sanctions dismantled the infrastructure that a functioning country uses to respond to emergencies. Hospitals were already understaffed and undersupplied before the first earthquake hit. Buildings across Caracas had not been maintained or updated to modern seismic standards because there was no money to do it. The construction that exists in the city reflects decades of economic decline, not preparation for a magnitude 7.5 event. So when the USGS says most people in the region live in structures vulnerable to the shaking, that is the mechanism behind the numbers. It is not just that the earthquake was powerful. It is that it struck a population already living in buildings that had no margin left to give. The aid response began almost immediately. The United States announced it was deploying search and rescue teams within hours of the quakes. Secretary of State Marco Rubio confirmed the U.S. was mobilizing assistance. Spain activated its military emergencies unit. The acting president of Venezuela asked for national unity, asked healthcare workers to report to hospitals, announced that schools would be converted to shelters and donation centers, suspended classes nationwide for a week, and halted non-essential activities across the country. 20 aftershocks were recorded in the first few hours alone. 6 of them were felt in Caracas within 2 hours of the main shock. Each one a reminder that the ground was still settling and that damaged buildings were still at risk of coming down further. In search and rescue operations, the first 72 hours are the window that matters most. The survival rate for people trapped under rubble dropped sharply after 3 days. Rescue teams right now are working against that clock, in a city with damaged roads, collapsed infrastructure, intermittent power, and aftershocks still rolling through every few hours. That is the operational reality on the ground tonight. The question scientists are now focused on is not what already happened. It is what comes next. After a doublet event of this magnitude, the fault system does not simply go quiet. Stress that releases in one section of a fault can transfer load to adjacent sections. Geologists will spend months modeling exactly how Wednesday's rupture redistributed pressure along the Bocanó, Moron, El Pilar system, and whether any sections are now closer to their own breaking point. That analysis takes time and produces no immediate certainty. But it is the question that determines whether Wednesday was a singular event or an open one. The other thing worth understanding is the historical record. Venezuela has experienced damaging earthquakes before. In 1812, in 1894, in 1967, each of those events caused destruction and loss of life. But none of them reached the magnitude of what struck on Wednesday. The 7.5 mainshock is the largest earthquake recorded in Venezuelan history. That is not a category that comes with a clear precedent for what recovery looks like, because Venezuela has never had to recover from something at this scale before. The confirmed death toll as of this moment stands at 32, but that number comes almost entirely from areas where communication is still functioning. That analysis takes time and produces no immediate certainty. But it is the question that determines whether Wednesday was a singular event or an open one. The other thing worth understanding is the historical record. Venezuela has experienced damaging earthquakes before. In 1812, in 1894, in 1967, each of those events caused destruction and loss of life. But none of them reached the magnitude of what struck on Wednesday. The 7.5 mainshock is the largest earthquake recorded in Venezuelan history. That is not a category that comes with a clear precedent for what recovery looks like, because Venezuela has never had to recover from something at this scale before. The confirmed death toll as of this moment stands at 32, but that number comes almost entirely from areas where communication is still functioning. La Guaira, declared a disaster zone by the acting president herself, has not yet reported its full count. The governor of Falcon State said workers were still searching for 15 people in rubble more than 4 hours after the quakes. In an unspecified area of southeastern Caracas, almost all high-rise buildings were reported heavily damaged or destroyed. The Macuto Hotel on the coast, a large multi-story waterfront structure, reduced to a pile of concrete and rebar. The number 32 will not be the final number. What Wednesday revealed is not just a geological reality underneath Venezuela. It is a compound vulnerability, a country whose physical infrastructure, economic resilience, and emergency capacity were already stretched close to the limit before the ground moved. A 7.5 earthquake anywhere is a catastrophe. A 7.5 earthquake in a country where 80% of the economy has evaporated and buildings have not been maintained in decades is a different order of problem. The Earth does not check the GDP before it moves. It just moves. Right now, the most important things happening are the ones you cannot see on camera. Rescue teams working quietly through collapsed floors in the dark. Doctors managing patient loads in hospitals running on backup generators. Families standing outside damaged